The family of a 22-month-old came together for a vigil tonight to remember her short life.
This little girl, kissed by the sun, was the light of her family's life. Her father called her his anchor, his miracle, and his legacy. At only 22, Brandon never thought much about the future, until the day a terrible accident left him unable to walk. From that moment on, his dreams were all about his daughter. He imagined watching her grow, laughing on her first day of school, and one day walking her down the aisle. But behind these dreams, something dark was already creeping into her small world. A predator had entered her life, slowly testing how much he could get away with. This innocent child, only 22 months old, would endure unthinkable violence. Her tiny body was forced to suffer cruelty no child should ever face. And while the man who hurt her sank deeper into drugs and twisted games, no one came in time to save her. Her body, fragile and pure, could not hold on forever. Before we continue, if this is your first time here, welcome. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Feel free to share in the comments. And to our amazing community, especially those of you who return week after week to seek justice and raise awareness, you are the reason this channel exists. Every share, every comment, every like is a voice for the voiceless. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because every case we cover is a chance to remember, to reflect, and to honor lives gone too soon. Zamora Lee Foe came into this world already surrounded by love. Even before she was born, her parents, Brandon and Zayla Goodwin, celebrated the news with joy. In a simple gender reveal, they popped a black balloon and laughed as glitter spilled everywhere. On November 15, 2022, in Jacksonville, Florida, baby Zamora was born. She was perfect, 8 pounds, 20.5 inches long, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to study the world around her. Soft fuzz covered her tiny head, hinting at the golden curls she would soon grow. From the first moment he held her, Brandon was in awe. He spent hours with her resting on his chest, guarding her dreams as she slept. To show his eternal devotion, he even tattooed her name across his neck. Just 1 month later, on December 15, 2022, Zamora was christened. Dressed in white lace, she looked like a little angel in her mother's arms. Though only 18, Zayla Goodwin stepped into motherhood with grace and love. She adored feeding her daughter, holding her close, and softly singing lullabies that lulled Zamora to sleep. But just weeks later, tragedy struck. In January 2023, Brandon was in a devastating car accident that left him with a severe spinal injury. Doctors told him he might never walk again. Worse, he would never be able to have more children. From then on, Zamora was not just his daughter, she was his miracle, his only child, the reason he fought through his pain each day. Zayla Goodwin suddenly had to carry more than most adults could handle. At barely 19, she was raising a newborn and caring for a paralyzed partner. The pressure was enormous, but she did not give up. Thankfully, Brandon's mother, Patricia Fox, became a constant support. She watched Zamora when Zayla needed to work or tend to Brandon, and she proudly showed off photos of her granddaughter, saying the family had never seen such a beautiful child before, and Zamora was beautiful inside and out. At 4 months, her fuzz began to turn into golden curls. Her smile grew brighter, her laughter contagious. At 5 months, she rolled over for the first time. By 6, she was sitting with support, babbling cheerfully as her little hands grabbed her favorite toys. One plush giraffe became her constant companion. She carried it everywhere, even to bed. By 8 months, her personality was shining. She loved being around her cousins, trying to feed herself with a spoon, even if most of it ended up on the floor. She loved swimming in the small backyard pool, splashing with her tiny hands and laughing so loudly that her squeals could be heard down the street. Zamora was more than a baby. She was joy. She was the heartbeat of her family. And for Brandon, who had lost so much, she was proof that life was still worth living. By her first birthday in November 2023, Zamora was already taking her first shaky steps. Holding tightly to her parents' hands, she stumbled forward with determination, her face glowing with pride. She spoke her first simple words, melting the hearts of everyone around her. At her little party, she smashed her tiny hands into her first birthday cake, smearing frosting across her cheeks as her family laughed and snapped photos. But behind the smiles, tension was growing. The constant stress, financial struggles, and Brandon's disability had put a heavy strain on his relationship with Zayla. The young couple, still barely adults themselves, decided to separate. It was heartbreaking, but they both agreed on one thing: Zamora would always be loved, and she would continue to see her father and his side of the family regularly. By the end of 2023, however, life for Zayla and her daughter began to change in ways no one could have predicted. As a young single mother, Zayla Goodwin struggled with the pressure of raising her child alone. That's when she met 22-year-old Nathaniel Davis. On the surface, Nathaniel seemed like everything she needed. He was charming, attentive, and made her laugh. Most importantly, he treated little Zamora with what looked like genuine affection. Zamora was drawn to him quickly. She would run to him with her toys, climb onto his lap, and beg for his phone so she could watch cartoons. Nathaniel smiled, praised her, and told Zayla Goodwin how clever and lively her daughter was. To an outsider, it might have looked like the beginning of a happy new chapter. But behind Nathaniel's friendly face was a dark past that no one in Goodwin's family took the time to uncover. Just months earlier, on January 29, 2023, Nathaniel had been arrested for domestic violence against another young woman, only 20 years old. Instead of jail time, he walked away with just 12 months of probation, a light punishment for a violent crime, a punishment that tragically would open the door for him to enter Zamora's life. At first, the changes in the household were subtle: a beer bottle left out on the table, strange phone calls at night, Nathaniel's late absences. But slowly, those little details turned into bigger problems. He introduced Zayla Goodwin to drugs, promising it would help her relax after long days of stress. Tired, overwhelmed, and barely 19, she gave in. Before long, she found herself dependent. While she drifted in a haze, Nathaniel began spending more and more time alone with Zamora. What looked like care soon turned into something darker. For Nathaniel, Zamora stopped being a child and started becoming something else, something he could control, a living doll he could manipulate however he pleased. By early 2024, Brandon started noticing red flags. At first, it was small things. Zayla Goodwin canceled one visit with his daughter, then another. Every time she had an excuse. Brandon, stuck in a wheelchair and unable to drive himself, waited helplessly for the next visit that never came. Patricia Fox, the grandmother who once cared for Zamora regularly, also grew alarmed. Zayla no longer brought the little girl over, and Patricia's calls went unanswered. Whenever she did get a response, Zayla's answers felt forced, vague, and distant. Patricia knew something was wrong. Nathaniel was behind it. He worked to isolate Zayla and the child from Brandon's family. He planted lies, telling Zayla that Brandon wanted to take her daughter away, that his family was against her, and that if they found out about her new lifestyle, they'd call Child Protective Services. Afraid and addicted, Zayla Goodwin pulled away further, letting Nathaniel take control of their lives. Investigators later pieced together that the abuse likely started around April or May 2024, when Zamora was about a year and a half old. She was an energetic toddler, filled with curiosity and independence. But those traits angered Nathaniel. He demanded silence and obedience. The first time she cried out in pain from what he had done, he panicked and left her alone, terrified of waking Zayla. But instead of stopping, he escalated. The next time, Nathaniel made sure she couldn't fight back. He gave her small doses of drugs to keep her quiet, to keep her from resisting. It was the beginning of a vicious cycle. Each time Zayla Goodwin passed out, Nathaniel used the opportunity to hurt Zamora again. If she cried, it only triggered his rage. By the end of the summer, Zamora's suffering reached a horrifying peak. One night, as Nathaniel tried to assault her again, the little girl found a burst of strength and ran to another room. That tiny act of resistance pushed him into a furious rage. Later that evening, as Zayla Goodwin lay unconscious from drugs, Nathaniel grabbed the toddler and twisted her legs with such force that he broke both of them. The pain she endured in that moment is beyond comprehension. The child who had just learned to walk, who once danced in the yard and splashed in the pool, could now only lie helpless, unable to crawl, unable to escape. By September 2024, her condition was so severe that it became harder for Nathaniel and Zayla to hide it. Neighbors noticed the once lively little girl no longer played outside. Some heard chilling cries at night, piercing screams that made their hearts ache. Fearing discovery, Nathaniel Nathaniel came up with a plan. He told Zyla they had to move. If anyone asked about Zamora's injuries, they would say she slipped in the bathtub. Zyla Goodwin, lost in her addiction and terrified of losing everything, agreed to repeat the lie. She was too far gone to protect her daughter, and so the nightmare continued. Zamora, once the joy of her family, was now trapped in silence, her world controlled by the very man who had destroyed her innocence. On September 5th, 2024, just 5 days before the tragedy that would change everything, Zyla Goodwin, Nathaniel Davis, and little Zamora moved into a modest home on Tourist Circle North in Jacksonville. They weren't alone. They stayed with Zyla's 75-year-old grandmother, Malene Pass, and her longtime boyfriend, Robert Owens. From the moment Malene saw her great-granddaughter, her heart sank. Something was very wrong. Zamora was nearly 22 months old, but she wasn't walking. She wasn't even trying to stand. Instead, she clung weakly to her mother's arms, her body limp. When Malene looked closer, she noticed bruises covering the child's body. There were too many, too dark, too suspicious. I asked what happened right away. Melon Pete later told investigators, and Zyla Goodwin told me she fell in the bathtub. But Melon wasn't convinced. She noticed Zamora's lips were swollen and red, cracked in places as though burned. The little girl hardly spoke, and when she tried to eat, she seemed to struggle. Again, Melon asked what was wrong. Zyla answered that it was just allergies, assuring her they had a pediatrician appointment set for September 13th. What Malene didn't know was the horrifying truth. Zamora's lips weren't swollen from allergies. They were burned from the harsh substances Nathaniel forced her to ingest to keep her quiet. And the child's broken legs weren't the result of a fall in the bathtub. They were the result of Davis's monstrous cruelty. Injuries so severe they could never heal properly without medical care. Over the next 5 days, Zamora's condition worsened. She barely ate, slept excessively, and grew frighteningly lethargic. Classic signs of a child drugged with powerful substances. Neighbors would later recall the haunting sound of her cries. On the night of September 9th, one woman said she stepped outside, trying to find where the screams were coming from. But just as suddenly as they began, they stopped. Investigators would later discover why. That night, Nathaniel struck Zamora so violently that he caused a massive brain hemorrhage. Instead of rushing her to a hospital, instead of calling for help, he did the opposite. He gave her another dose to keep her quiet. Then he left her bleeding, broken, and alone on a mattress in the corner of the room. He went to sleep while the toddler's brain filled with blood. By morning, Zamora's body couldn't fight anymore. The hemorrhage had reached a critical stage. Her tiny heart stopped beating. On September 10th, 2024, Zyla was jolted awake by noise from the other room. She rushed out to find Nathaniel bent over her daughter, attempting CPR. He told her he had found Zamora face down on the mattress, not breathing. In panic, he carried the lifeless child to the bathroom and tried to revive her by pouring water over her face, a desperate method known among drug users to wake someone from an overdose. When that failed, he began chest compressions. Finally, Zyla dialed 911. When paramedics arrived, they found Zamora without a pulse, her body limp and cold. They worked frantically, pushing adrenaline into her tiny veins until her heart began to beat again, but her breaths would never return on their own. A ventilator now did the work of her damaged body. The paramedics weren't the only ones who saw her condition that day. Police officers who responded with them immediately noticed something wasn't right. Zamora's body told a story no parent's excuses could cover. She was covered in bruises, scars, and injuries that no accident could explain. She was rushed to Wolfson Children's Hospital, while detectives stayed behind to search the home. What they found left even seasoned officers shaken. Near Zamora's mattress, they discovered bloody bandages, sheets soaked through with blood, diapers in the trash stained with it, drug paraphernalia scattered across the room. This wasn't a home, one detective later said. It was a torture chamber for this child. On a second search, they uncovered even more. Hidden phones with disturbing content that hinted at the sickening truth. At the hospital, doctors examined Zamora and documented the nightmare written on her body. She had a severe brain hemorrhage from blunt force trauma, a broken left arm, both legs fractured at different stages of healing, bruises and abrasions from head to toe, marks on her neck from strangulation attempts. bleeding in her most private areas, proof of sexual abuse, both natural and unnatural, chemical burns to her mouth and lips, and toxicology tests revealed the unthinkable. Her tiny body was filled with illegal substances. The neurosurgeon told police there was no chance of recovery. The damage to her brain was too severe. Even if she survived, she would never wake up again. She would remain in a vegetative state. It tears your heart out. One investigator said, through tears, the amount of injuries, the level of abuse to cause them, it's beyond words. Though some parts of the arrest warrant remain redacted, what was released confirmed the same grim fact. Zamora had been sexually abused in the most horrific ways imaginable. When police delivered the news to Brandon Foe, her father, his world collapsed. "I broke down completely. I didn't know how to function anymore," Brandon recalled. Learning not just about her injuries but about the abuse shattered him. Despite his disability, he rushed to the hospital to be by her side. When he saw his daughter lying motionless, connected to tubes and machines, he knew he had to honor her somehow. He got another tattoo of her name, this time on his face, a permanent promise that he would fight for her justice until his last breath. The very next day, police arrested both Zyla and Nathaniel. They were charged with child neglect, bail set at $500,000 each. For 9 long days, Zamora clung to life on machines, her small chest rising and falling only because of the ventilator. Brandon never left her side. He sat for hours each day, holding her tiny hand, whispering to her, praying for a miracle. Just 2 years earlier, Brandon himself had fought for his life after the car accident that left him paralyzed. Then it was his family's love that kept him going. Now, with every ounce of strength he had, he tried to be that same source of hope for Zamora. But each day, hope slipped further away. Scans showed her brain damage was catastrophic. Doctors gently prepared Brandon for the truth. Even if her body survived, his daughter, the bright-eyed, laughing little girl he once held on his chest, was already gone. On September 18th, after speaking with specialists, Brandon was forced to make the most painful choice of his life. He agreed to remove his daughter from life support. Today, she was unplugged. She's gone. No air, nothing. The grief-stricken father told local reporters, his voice heavy with heartbreak. In her final hours, little Zamora was not alone. She was surrounded by family members who loved her deeply. They gathered around her hospital bed, holding her tiny hands, whispering how much she was loved, and promising that she would never be forgotten. Even in his deepest grief, Brandon managed to find strength. He made a decision that allowed his daughter's short life to bring hope to others. He agreed to organ donation. Zamora's heart was given to a 6-month-old baby girl born with a serious heart defect. Her liver went to another 6-month-old boy fighting to survive. Her kidneys gave new life to yet another child. "I thought part of Zamora would live on in other children," Brandon explained softly. "Maybe some meaning can be found in this senseless tragedy." The community gathered to honor her memory. At Stockton Park, people held a vigil. They released blue balloons, the same color as Zamora's eyes, and lit candles in the evening sky. Many brought teddy bears and toys, later donated to a shelter for abused children. It was a scene of grief, but also of unity, with strangers and neighbors coming together for a little girl they never even met, but who had touched their hearts. On December 4th, 2024, the medical examiner made it official. Zamora's death was ruled a homicide caused by blunt force trauma. Then, on March 20th, 2025, a grand jury handed down upgraded charges. Nathaniel Davis, just 23 years old, was indicted for first-degree murder, sexual battery, child abuse, and evidence tampering. Zyla Goodwin, only 21, faced charges of aggravated manslaughter. By April 2025, prosecutors announced something rare. They would seek the death penalty for Nathaniel Davis. The murder of this innocent child was especially atrocious and cruel and involved torture of the victim. The prosecution declared in court. Court hearings began soon after. Lawyers introduced themselves. Judges set schedules. Discovery files were passed between the defense and the state. Motions and delays followed, as is often the case in trials of this magnitude. By May 2025, hearings were still in the preliminary stages. The trial itself is not expected until 2026, but no matter how long it takes, the community wants justice for Zamora. In Jacksonville, her memory lives on. At her final resting place stands a simple gray headstone with her photograph. The words engraved read, "Fly high, little angel." Fresh flowers and soft toys are always placed there, proof that people have not forgotten the little girl whose suffering sparked outrage and awareness. Her story has already changed lives. Strangers who never knew her now fight harder for child protection. Parents hold their children a little closer. And in the quiet of a cemetery in Jacksonville, a father visits his daughter's grave, still broken but determined to keep her name alive. Zamora Lee Foe's story is one of unimaginable cruelty, but also one of love, remembrance, and the desperate hope that her death will not be in vain. Thank you for watching this case all the way through. What are your thoughts about this tragedy? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to help us share more stories like this, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. It keeps this work alive and makes sure voices like Zamora's are never silenced.